going into Numbers 25, I think we'll see, we're going back to the perspective of Israel now, and I think we'll see a lot of ourselves, at least I see a lot of myself, when God gives us a victory, shows us where we're going, and we can kind of see the finish line. We start to get comfortable. Israel's starting to get comfortable. We just left a different perspective where Balak and Balaam were having conversations about Israel being attacked. And Balaam said to Balak, no, you shouldn't do that. That would be a bad thing. And now we are focused back in on Israel and them settling in that northern part, away from Edom, up in Moab, right left of Jordan, and positioned in Shittim where they're about to cross over, but they settled in Shittim. Abel Shittim. Shittim is wood, acacia wood, so it is a very beautiful treed area. It's a nice land. And so I don't know if they're even thinking about crossing the Jordan. I think they just settled down there. And the reason why is because they began to take on their practices. And keep in mind, as I'm telling you these stories, I'm hoping that you can relate to their journey, you know, in your lifetime. And again, this is for my grandchildren, my brothers and sisters in Kenya, my brothers and sisters in Ghana, and whomever else this helps. God bless you on a journey from Genesis to Revelation. I do not know how long it's going to take. But I think it's also important to understand that this journey to Canaan is the journey. It is the second I'm going to take that back. I don't know if it's the second. But there are stories that give you the success completion. And you might hear me say that from this point forward. Because to accomplish anything, if you look at this journey, from the study time in Leviticus to the coming together in Exodus to the overcoming the attitudes and here in Numbers to the coming together and making a decision when they left Egypt. I mean, you know, the teamwork, respecting the leaders, all these different principles, the sacrifices, the obedience, the mentorship necessary to have a successful anything community, business, family. It's all right there in that story. But also in that story, as you become successful and there are no more battles to fight, you begin to take on the characteristics of the community around you instead of sticking with the characteristics that got you there to that community. I wrote a book called Ghetto Education. And in my book, I talk about the importance of adapting, when you go into a community, adapting to that community's that community's ways. So in other words, you don't necessarily go in trying to change that community. You go in and understand that you're fitting into that community. with Israel, they brought the community with them. You know, in the Jewish community, at least here in Southern California, where I have the most experience with the Jewish community that I have here in Southern California, in Chicago, where I was from, I had some interaction with the American Muslim community. If you were to go into their neighborhood in Chicago, you had to be respectful of their community. And so it goes here in the Jewish community, you have to be respectful of their community because they brought their community with them. But they still use their own businesses. They still, use their own synagogues. They still, I hope you're catching me. They still study together. All the different practices that they want, they when they got to Shittim, the goal was to keep the same practices, keep the same business principles, the same family principles. Because you're bringing the community with you. It didn't happen. They began to absorb the community of Shittim, Abel Shittim, and worship the gods of Baal. Baal is just a simple word. We call Baal, some people in their uneducated. Anyway. Some people think it's the devil. It just means husband, Lord of the mountain, Baal of Peor, Lord of the mountain, Mount Peor. But this God that they worship, that they created on their own, just like the children of Israel tried to create a golden calf. This God that they were creating wasn't real. They were worshiping the dew. They were worshiping the rain. They were worshiping fertility. So it was a high sexual culture. Israel bought in. A lot of the Israelites bought into this highly charged, highly sexual culture of rain, dew, and sex with the Midianite women and the Moabite women. So instead of going in and bringing in the kingdom of God, they went in and were succumbed to the culture of Baal Peor, Baalpeor. It was a mountainous region, and it was a lot of moisture. We try to make things so complicated, and it's not complicated. If you go to Miami, I've never been to Miami. So let me use a place that I go. I've been to, I've been to Washington, Oregon, of course here in California, Illinois, Tennessee, Texas, Georgia. I've been to a few states. I haven't been to them all. I know I'm missing some. Nevada, Arizona. So it'd be like me going into the territory of Texas. Texas here in America, for my brothers and sisters in Kenya and my brothers and sisters in Ghana. And whomever else I'm talking to outside of the country of the United States of America. So it'd be like me going from California, where there's a particular type of culture, into Texas and adopting the particular types of culture in Texas. In doing so, I'm not taking the culture of the kingdom of God where I'm going. I'm adopting their culture. In my book, Ghetto Education, it's all about learning other people's cultures. In the kingdom of God, it's about taking the kingdom of God with you. In other words, that is your culture. And you're sharing your culture. You're respecting the culture of the people around you. In other words, you're not trying to push your culture on anyone, but you're living out your culture. In other words, you're saying no to the Moabite woman. You're saying no to the Midianite woman. You're saying no to worshiping the dew and the rain. You're saying no. It's not that the rain isn't happening and they're not going up to the mountain to worship this Baal of Peor. It's just that you decide to engage differently. It's really just that simple. Didn't happen here. In Numbers chapter 25, the people of Israel, or the men of Israel in particular, decided to worship. Verse 1, Numbers 25. And Israel abode in Shittim, across from Jericho. I threw the across from Jericho part in because that's where they were going eventually. And the people began to commit whoredom with the daughters of Moab, and they called the people unto the sacrifices of their gods. Therein lies the problem. The people began to sacrifice unto the gods of the Moabites, unto the gods or the god of Baal, Lord Peor, Lord of the mountain. And as sacrifice, and the people did eat and bowed down to their gods. Yeah, I'll say that later. And Israel joined himself, and Israel joined himself, and Israel joined himself. I'll say this now. So this wasn't an individual action. This was a corporate action. I was typing back and forth with someone who was supporting someone being degrading the leader of this country, which today is a man by the name of Joe Biden. He's the president. Someone called him Genocide Joe. And I says, I don't understand what denigrating someone, what point you're making. And because they feel like he's responsible for the actions that are taking place in Gaza, which is modern day Philistia. We'll talk about that soon. It's where Jesus was born. Anyway. And we have a habit of thinking that individuals are responsible for corporate cooperation or corporate actions. Anytime you hear the word Israel, it's not an individual. It's a corporate action. So the problem isn't that an individual lost their mind. It's that the corporation or the cooperation or the government of that organization endorsed it. Verse 3, and Israel joined himself unto Baal Peor, and the anger of the Lord was kindled against Israel, not an individual. And then the Lord had to have a conversation in verse 4, not with individuals or with the princes or with Levi. He had to have a conversation with Moses. So he said unto Moses, take all the heads of the people and hang them up before the Lord against the sun, that the fierce anger of the Lord may be turned away from Israel. And Moses said unto the judges of Israel, slay every one of his men that were joined unto Baal Peor. These are not individuals. These are the princes of Israel. Decisions were made by leadership. On an individual basis, it's not right to take on the practices of the world. But on a corporate basis, it leads to corrective actions. These principles that I'm sharing with you are not to, I'm not trying to come across in judgment. I'm just sharing with you the principles that God or nature constitutes, requires in every generation. Our job as representatives of God who wish to live according to the kingdom of God is to do so. Live according to the kingdom of God, regardless of the actions of our leadership. It can be very compelling when your pastor decides to adopt some practices that are not consistent with the kingdom of God. It can be very confusing. Very confusing. I know it confused me. And I'm sure I did some confusing of others when I was executive pastor a couple of times. So none of us are immune to the possibility of sleeping with the Moabite woman or worshiping the dew and the rain. It can happen. But it affects so many people. And God does require some heads to roll. In other words, it's saying it more in 21st century language, pulling people out of power. And here he's talking about their heads being hung towards the sun, but today that would be called taking people out of power. Because they're leading the people astray. They haven't hit the goal yet, and they're still uncontrollable. They're making mistakes that God doesn't want them to make. Someone has to be held responsible. Someone has to lose power. In verse 4, the Lord said unto Moses, take all the heads of the people, and hang them up before the Lord against the sun. All the heads of the people. Now I know you're talking about a physical head, but metaphorically, but we're also talking about the physical heads of all the 12 tribes. 13th tribe has already suffered a loss. His name was Aaron. Eleazar, his son, is now reigning in his stead, being trained by the great Moses. who already knows his position, he will never make it into the land of Canaan. And he's right across the river, teaching and pushing people to learn these principles, the importance of discipline and that sort of thing. In the midst of a land, teaching them how to be the leaders and sharing with people the kingdom of God instead of adopting the world system, trying to fit in so that people can see the kingdom of God. It's impossible to do it that way because you just compromise your values. So they can't see the kingdom of God. In verse 5, he says, and Moses said unto the judges, Numbers 25, verse 5, and Moses said unto the judges of Israel, slay every one of his men that were joined unto Baal Peor. And behold, one of the children of Israel came and brought unto his brethren a Midianitish woman in the sight of Moses and in the sight of all the congregation of the children of Israel, who weeping the door of the tabernacle of the congregation. And when Phinehas, the son of Eleazar, the high priest, that is, the son of Aaron, the priest, saw, rose up from among the congregation and took a javelin in his hand and went after the man of Israel into the tent. This is verse 8. And thrust both of them through the man of Israel and the woman through her belly. So the plague was stayed from the children of Israel. A small thing, a side note I want you to notice. And when Phinehas, son of Eleazar, legacy, Eleazar is now the elder, the son of Aaron, the ancestor. So when all of us saw, he rose up from among the congregation. It's not about you fitting in. It's about you bringing the kingdom of God to the land that God will show you, and staying humble once we gain some success, to live still according to his principles. CashApp $MrPaulDozier, CashApp $MrPaulDozier. We're on a journey from Genesis to Revelation. I have no idea how long it's going to take us to get there, but I thank you so much for taking the journey with us.